to join the opposition, so to speak. In other words, become a Roman or become a Frenchman or whatever it might be. In those days, it was always along such nationalistic, ethnic lines, because in the ancient world there was no such thing essentially as being an individual. A person belonged to a group. So you were either a Roman or you were a Jew. You being, as it were, an independent practitioner, living and existing and thinking entirely for yourself and in isolation from everything else going on around you, was not really an option. It didn't exist, essentially. Today, it's not so. Today, it's different. Because present-day Western society, over a period of generations, has become individualistic and atomized. A person can live, as it were, on a desert island, so to speak, allegorically and metaphorically, and decide that I'll just not be part of the Jewish community. But it doesn't mean I have to join a Christian community or any other group. I'll just be nothing. But again, being nothing, in other words, not being undefined, being unaffiliated, is also, today at least, certainly a kind of affiliation, because that is, so to speak, the state religion for many people within the current Western paradigm, which of course is crumbling, but it exists for the meantime, and therefore, if you say, well, I don't belong to anything, well, essentially you do. You belong to the great fake stream world of nothingness. So that's also a kind of affiliation. At any rate, a Jew who simply finds it expedient to ignore the Torah, to deny his Jewishness, and adopt another identity or a totally different set of ideas and values, that is a mishumah d'chol Torah. And yes, usually such people try to insinuate themselves with those who are powerful, those who are wealthy, those who can bring them some benefit. What we see today, at the present time, in Israel and also outside Israel, as from what I hear, but certainly in Israel, we see over the past year and a half since the beginning of this war, we see a certain change of heart, quite a definite change of heart, on the part of many Jews who, both in the past and also at present, would not define themselves as dati, as religious, but they have realized that they are Jewish and they must be Jewish, and they wish to identify as Jews. This is the only way to understand, for example, the phenomenon which I haven't heard it spoken of recently, but it may continue to this moment. I would not be surprised if it does. But it was certainly spoken of a great deal at the beginning of the war. Many soldiers who knew nothing about the Torah or about mitzvot, about Judaism, were interested in receiving talit katan with tzitzit. And you could ask yourself, why were they interested in doing this? If you want to all of a sudden begin praying to Hashem because you're frightened, well, that you can do that. You don't need tzitzit for that. And if you just want to show that you somehow identify with more religious Jews or with the Torah, you could wear a kippah. You don't need tzitzit. What the two things that many soldiers requested were tzitzit and tefillin, but even more tzitzit for some reason. And the explanation, I think, is that what is more Jewish, what is more obviously Jewish than tzitzit and tefillin? We'll take tzitzit for now. If you're talking about a kippah, for example, a skull cap, well, the Pope also wears a kippah, as do certain other, so do some Muslims. It's not uniquely Jewish. Tzitzit is uniquely Jewish. You will never find a person in the world walking around with tzitzit if they're not Jewish. At least I don't think that I've ever seen such a thing, and I doubt that anyone else has. Or wearing tefillin. What I'm getting at is as follows. It used to be the case, if you go back decades, that you always had those who were dati or haredi, shall we say. In other words, they were Orthodox Jews. However many distinctions and differences there are between the various streams and groups. And you had those who were described as Hilonim in Israel. Hilonim means secular. And you did have many people who were considered, who may have described themselves as Masorti, traditional, which means they would observe certain aspects of the Torah. But the fact was that over time, for obvious reasons, because the Israeli society was very secular, and there was a very deliberate attempt, and it was an official policy to cause such people to become openly and steadfast chilonim, and not have anything to do with traditional Judaism. So essentially, that middle group, which was actually the majority, at least half of the population, shall we say, if not more, they were essentially lumped together and could be considered as one with the Chilonim. Certainly in political terms this was true, and in many other regards. What has happened over the last few decades, and very clearly and very specifically over the past year and a half, is that many such Jews, there are also Jews who are considered hardcore Chilonim, secular, who are beginning to sing a different tune now. They're all of a sudden more interested in hearing something about Judaism, about the Torah. They're less anti than they used to be, or not at all anti any longer, in fact interested. And there are many other Jews who were always traditional to some extent, but it was more or less swept under the rug, and it was not something that you spoke about in polite society, so to speak. You never know if the person listening to you would be pleased or interested or impressed to know that you thought this or did that. And now it's things are changing. Many Jews in Israel are much more openly, willingly, even enthusiastically embracing their Jewishness. Different people express this in different ways. Not everyone becomes a Baal Teshuvah, Hozer B'Teshuvah overnight. But there is definitely a shift. And this is an interesting and important point to note. There has been for decades again, but it's a process, a drawn out evolutionary process. But it has most definitely been speeded up by recent events.
The temple patches are also part of this phenomenon?
Yes, I believe, no question. I believe so. Yes, absolutely. It's well known, for example, and this has been going on for many years, even decades, that in certain moshavim and kibbutzim where it would never have occurred to the founders who founded these yishuvim, these kibbutzim, shall we say, 100 years ago, or 90 years ago, or 80 years ago. It would never have occurred to them that would be a functioning Bet Knesset, a synagogue within their kibbutz. They were opposed to such a notion completely. And today you can find a functioning Bet Knesset, which opens up on Shabbat, and people come to, maybe not, obviously not the whole, probably not the whole kibbutz, so maybe it's not packed solid, but there are people interested who come, and they had to very often fight the authorities and their fellow kibbutznikim to even set it up, to get it running. But it happens, it exists. And throughout the country there are many, particularly on Yom Kippurim, also Rosh Hashanah, minyanim that are set up in all kinds of community centers and school buildings, what have you, for a general wider public that does not frequent Batei Knesset, synagogues. But they do want to come to such a thing, and this was not the case way back. Then, if you wanted to experience some kind of tefillah on Yom Kippurim, you had to go to a Beth Knesset, you had to go to a shul. And things are changing. And this, of course, bothers greatly. The old guard, those whose ideology was and remains that we should be Am Kechol Ha'amim, a nation like all others, and we should embrace a complete rejection of the Torah, Has v'Shalom. And this is, in fact, the next category that Rambam discusses, which we'll discuss next time. Machtieh harabim, those who cause the people, the masses, to sin. In other words, who lead others astray. In other words, they are ideological Jews, or so to speak. That is to say, ideological Jewish, ideologically motivated non-Jews. In other words, they want to be non-Jewish in every possible way, and they regret and resent even their Jewishness, and they did their best to suppress it and hide it and deny it. Well, now it's been going on for a number of generations in most cases. But things have not been going their way for many years now, and this bothers them very greatly. And this also explains some of the political events and upheavals that we see today. And that's a good sign. It shows that they know they're on the back foot. They're not doing very well. A large number of people in Israel today see that the supposedly avant-garde, intellectual Ashkenazi secular left has nothing to offer. Decades ago, many people believed that they had a tremendous amount to offer. And this is no longer the case. There are those who are, true believers in that system, and they will continue to be so. But many today are turning their back on that world, on that entire milieu and stratum of Israeli society. So these are positive developments, and B'ezrat Hashem, we hope to see these things evolve further in a positive direction and come to fruition.